God love it when technology works and I know how to start these things. Hey, everybody, it is Kelly Hoey, author of Build Your Dream Network, here for another virtual water cooler. And I'm kind of excited. I'm here with author Miranda Hill, and I'm hoping your video hasn't frozen, but hey, what the heck, you'll come back, I know it. And Miranda and I met because of Penguin Random House, where we are both authors. There she is. Both are authors at Penguin Random House, and we're both Canadian, so watch out. Which part? I mean, I know you're in Hamilton now, but where was born and raised in Canada? Since everyone thinks that all Canadians know each other, well, we didn't.
Right.
Before.
We didn't know each other. No. But I gotta say, that is one of those things where you're like, Canadian. I think that is one of the things in networking. We do tend to, if we're in a non-Canadian setting and we find another Canadian, we're like, oh, better talk to that person. What's their deal?
Yeah.
I grew up in a small town, and it's outside Toronto, about an hour and a half north of Toronto, in a rural setting. People who aren't familiar with Ontario and think Toronto and suburbs always think, oh, well, you were in a sprawl, but I was in a really rural kind of environment. We were the biggest town for miles around. So we had like a large high school, but everybody bussed in for 2 hours to get there and stuff like that. So that's kind of where I grew up. So I often laugh because, sometimes you're in these settings, particularly when I've done a lot of fundraising, that sort of thing, and everybody's gone to private school, and then they ask you where you went to school. And it's just, it tells you where the conversation's going to go, because some people are like, oh, they're out, right? As soon as they know where you grew up. And then other people are like, oh, fascinating. Tell me more.
Tell me more. Okay, which small town outside of Toronto? Tirana.
It's called Alliston, and it's not that small a town anymore. Late in my time there, like in the last couple of years, we got a big car plant, which was huge. And suddenly we had food at the grocery store none of us had ever seen, So it was a very kind of small town Ontario existence. And someday that will be definitely part of what I write about. It's not now, but someday it will be.
Okay. So you have a book of stories that you put out, Sleeping Bunny, fabulous book. You're working on an epic novel.
I'm working on an epic novel.
Okay. Yeah. Discretion. How long have you been working on said epic novel? When do we get to read said epic novel?
Well, I'm about halfway through a rewrite on about 1,200 manuscript pages. So I'm sure it will come down a little bit, but you have this thing where you hand it to your editor or your agent, and you're like, okay, well, they're going to be like, oh, / And very kindly, sort of, mine didn't do that. And they were like, great, it's good, long. So I wrote a long book, and I am kind of known for short stories that aren't short. So I've written a novel that's particularly long. It's my first novel. Don't necessarily recommend it as as a project to start out that way, but that seems to be the way I tell the story. Lots of perspectives. It's two young women coming from Canada on a train to Pittsburgh in 1890. And they make a deal that is kind of one you can't get out of. And it follows their trajectory over the next 5 years.
Okay. Short stories that became a novel. I'm thinking of, I managed to find what was it? It was like the editor's proof, whatever, Vance copy of Elizabeth Strout's first novel. And those had originally started off as submissions to the New Yorker. And
Right.
It had an editor there who kept saying, not for us, but you should expand this, you should expand this. And lo and behold, 5 years later, dude's at, I think, Penguin Random House, and he gets this manuscript, and it was the short stories into this.
Right.
When did you know that this idea was more than one of your short stories?
Oh, well, that's what I promised my agent and my editor. I was like, as a discerning reader, and I love being a writer who reads, but some people find it takes the fun out of it, they say, but I don't think so, because it's kind of like being a magician and seeing another magician at work. And you you need to know how they got the trick done, right? It's exciting. It's exciting. It's like, how did they do that? How did they fool even me, you know? And so I am not particularly fond of something that reads like a short story, but could have had a little more editing, you know, and it's turned into a novel, not referring to something like Olive Kitteridge, where those are all so interconnected. And I mean, that's a work of true genius. But things that sometimes are kind of just like, oh, I needed a few more pages and then I could call this a novel. Right. I wanted to be certain that what I was doing was truly a novel and not me going, oh, could I add a little filler here? And so I think that's why
they could take a detour on that train. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So I just thought, like, okay, I'll really fish for, you know, the shark and see what I get. And so that's how I wound up with, you know, a great big story, because I knew it wasn't a story that could be told in any other way.
Okay. And there was actually a question here from someone on LinkedIn. The name of the shorts. Well, Miranda, your book of short stories are.
It's called Sleeping Funny. Right. Yes.
That was your original book. But you're doing, between now and when Discretion comes out, you're doing other writing. Are you
I do other stuff.
In short stories? Are they appearing in any publications we can?
I'm not doing short stories now. I've found that I can work on other kinds of writing, but not two fictions at once. Even when I was working on short fiction, I would tend to write just a single piece at a time and finish it and then move on. So I'm writing essays, and I mostly, like, the things you can see on a regular refreshing basis are on my blog, which is called the Mimi Festo. Mimi is what my family calls me. And so the Mimi Festo is where I kind of puzzle things out and talk about what's going on in my writing. But it's also where I speak to other artists, really, and try to offer some words of encouragement, or some, you know, even just showing them sometimes where I'm struggling. And I think that's helpful.
Oh, I think it's always so helpful. And you know what I'll do? I'll put in, when I retweet this, because this is streaming live to Twitter and it's also on LinkedIn, I will put in a retweet, or in the post, I'll put a link to your blog. As soon as you said, you know, letting know the struggles, I think that's why I enjoy reading books by authors on the writing process.
Right.
You know, Anne Lamont's, you know, Bird by Bird, Stephen King, you know, on writing. And you're just like, oh, great. They have crazy making in their head too, when they're writing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, when you're doing something that requires faith, right? You're doing something that requires faith. And so when you require faith, you have to build that up over and over again. And what you want to do is teach your own muscle, like train your own muscle. But sometimes you need a team. Sometimes you need your mom in the stands, and sometimes you need a coach. And that's the other thing that I do, is I have started working with other artists to just kind of work with that sense of, how do you still feel good about what you're working with, whether it's after you're finished something and you want to promote it, because especially as people who go away and work on something for quite a while and sometimes kind of lose touch with speaking about what they're doing out in the world. Sometimes they need guidance, but also confidence and a sense of connecting with something that you're probably quite sick of by the time it comes out. I don't know, Kelly, did you feel that when you were finished with your manuscript and you were like, you have to be excited to put it out there, but there are times where you're like, how long have I been doing this? How long, right? Did you find that?
Well, this is what's so interesting, the difference between fiction and nonfiction.
Right.
There are fiction writing friends of mine who were like, you sold your book before you wrote it?
Right.
What the heck is that? And then I had a 4.5 month time to write it.
Right.
Like Speedy Gonzalez,
That's probably good.
Well, yes, and because, it's that, that I like to say to people, that time in life, like when you're in college and someone says, create a detailed outline of your essay, which none of us never, ever did when we were in college. But that idea of doing that was, I had that detailed outline, and that was part of the pitch to the publisher. And so it was like, work your way through the detailed outline and get it done. And then I guess that gap period between when you've submitted your manuscript and it's been edited,
right,
and when books are actually published and, you know, stuck on that, literally the slow boat from China to get over here, there was that kind of break of at a time period. But yeah, there is an element of,
that was your restoration, your personal restoration time.
Get ready for that marketing. So you coach, and I knew this from your website because I did look at your website. You coaching other authors
it's writers, it's artists, you know, creative people, because I think we have a lot of overlap. Definitely with writers, there are very specific kinds of overlap. You know, what you're talking about, like how do you put together a book proposal, things like that are things I know very well, fiction, nonfiction. But also there are crises of confidence. There are, what project do I work on next? There are, I've been away because of illness or care to somebody else, or for some reason my career isn't going the way I want, and I need to bring myself back to my work. And those really cut across many, many different types of art and creation generally. And so it's a wide range of people that I'm talking to. And I like that too, because I think that we really restore ourselves, and we inspire ourselves, not just by people who are doing the same kind of exact same thing that we're doing, but by having that network that includes mentors and peers who are working in slightly different media.
I like the way you're weaving in my topic there. I'm gonna detour back to. So I'm interested, because this always fascinates me. So you will understand this. I grew up reading Robertson Davies, Margaret Atwood, Alice Munro, like reading those.
The Canadian canon at the time, yes.
It was, my mother was back at university, and those were the books on the shelf. I was able to read those, and then there was a lot of Jilly Cooper and some other stuff. I read those as well. But you know, but when I'm reading like those books and thinking about those books, it's like, how do you write this? So what's your writing part? Like, what's your, like, when you're writing, like, okay, you've got your idea. How are you writing fiction? Like, what's your daily, weekly, like, what's your process? This fascinates me.
So I always tell people I really feel that there's no recipe. I mean, you were talking about how you, you know, for the nonfiction, yes, you want to definitely be like, this is what I'm going to write about. I'm not talking about a memoir or a work of creative nonfiction. I'm talking about a work of practical nonfiction, something that gives somebody a sense of how to do something. I wrote a book years ago on midwifery in Canada, and it was a guide to using a midwife and having a baby with a midwife. This was in the days just soon after legislation. So yes, of course, you're going to put together a whole arc. This is what I'm going to say. This is why I'm the person to say it, that sort of thing. And some people do that as well with their fiction, right? They plan it all out. And some people are everyday writers. Some people are binge writers. I am not a plan it out on the first round sort of person. I'm getting a sense of things, and that's the way I'm moving through. That might make it take longer for me, but that's where the life is. And I've always kind of felt that for my writing, if the life's not in it originally, it's like a Frankenstein body. I can't put it back in. You know, some people are like, I do a skeleton and then I fill it out and that's where the life comes. It really depends on how you create. I am a do it every day. My husband is also an author, and he is the hare, and I am the tortoise. And he always says, you know how that story goes, how it ends. So I do it every day. If I'm not working on it in some way every day, like there's days I miss, somebody comes, like I work at home, right? So I have 5 adult children. Christmas time, I'm not working. I have a home office. It's not happening when everyone is at my house with their partners. But for the most part, I work every day. And it makes me feel like the egg in the nest is warm. And, if I go away too long, it's cold. It's just gone. So I think that's one of the things that makes me like to write other things as well, though, because when you're working on a really long project, and I have to admit that I am coming to this realization having taken a different course. I have been working on this really long project, and I was like, no, I'm just going to focus on this, and I'm just going to get it done. And that is kind of, for me, has been a bit soul destroying for a really long project, right? So then it's like, wait a second, why don't I write in other genres and just get back to doing more of that? It hasn't slowed my fiction writing process down, but it has given me a sense of completion, because I am a completionist. And so when you're working on a great big thing and you can't complete it really, really fast, even if you're a fast writer, and I'm not, then you don't feel as good at the end of the day. But if you know that you've got a few little things that give you the little dopamine hit of it's done, it's posted, I sent it to an editor, that's helpful.
Yeah, there's one thing of like creating your own deadlines or trying to get your own dopamine hit, but it's a dopamine hit from somebody else always, just a little.
Yeah, and some people really work on a word count basis. I'm not a word count sort of person. I am I like to bring things to the right note at the end of scenes and things like that. So I'm kind of going to that point where I'm like, this is a piece, and now I can move to the next piece. But as I said, I really feel there's no recipe, because every writer I know does something a little bit differently, and some of them do things radically differently. So what matters is how it reads to the reader. And unless you are a little bit of a nerd, a reading fan nerd, and I am, but you may be too. I know you're a big reader. We probably don't know that much about the author and how they got the job done. We just know the job's done, and it hit us.
Yeah, well, it's getting back to some of those books that I mentioned. It's even now, having published, why I read those kinds of books, because it's like it fascinates me. Like, what is the process of how do they write? And it's often one of those things I say to people, think about your own creative process. Think about when in the day you are most productive.
Oh God, yeah, that's the trick, right?
And be hyper aware of that. And when you find that time, guard it like.
Yeah, you grab that. So I've gone through the periods where I was up at 5, writing at 5 or 4:30, especially when I had young kids at home. I'm a bit older. I don't have that life now. So I grab more of the early part of the day, and if I have a good early part of the day, I tend to be able to go on longer on that work, but if I don't have a good early part of the day, I'm probably not going to it later. Or if I don't get to it early in the day. So I hate those, that dentist appointment that you have to have at 8:30 because it's the only time they could give it to you. I'm like, curses. Yeah. But I know people who love the silence of the night when everybody else has gone to sleep. And for me, I'm done by then. I'm just done. I couldn't start fresh then. Sometimes I'm very excited and I'm still working on something then, but I couldn't start. So it really is also, like you say, it's about your own rhythms, right? Your creative rhythms.
Yeah, absolutely. Paying attention to that. All right, so I am thinking about Stephen King's book on writing. And
it's one of the best ever.
Yeah, so he talks about who he writes for, and he writes every book for his wife.
Yes, and there's that wonderful scene in the book where she's reading in the car and she tells him not to be so needy because he wants to know she's laughing and loving it, right?
So who do you write for?
Yeah, people ask me this all the time. I kind of think maybe for better, for worse, I think I originally just write for myself. Like, it has to sound right to me. And I'm very oral. Like, I want it to sound good if I speak it. Not every piece that you do is going to be something that you read at a reading, for example, but I want it to sound good. And so there are certain senses I kind of apply when I'm reading it back to myself. But I think one of the reasons that I don't have a person in mind is I've been quite amazed by who responds to my work. It's not necessarily people. If I could have created an avatar of who I thought my work was for, I don't think I would have got it right. I know that's a great thing to do for business, but for my creative work, the people who've come and said, oh my gosh, your book means so much to me, or who write to me, are often not who I had in my head. And so I'm kind of trying to keep open to that. Right now, I've been reading Seth Godin's book. Well, I've read it a couple of times now. It's so simple. The latest one, The Practice, and he talks really about shipping it for shipping your creative work for your reader, for whomever the intended audience is, and how that's a generous act. And I think that that's something that helps me hold on to it. The idea that, okay, you don't have faith every day in yourself, but you want to have faith in getting the story to the person who wants it. And right before I read that particular passage, I got an email from somebody who, out of the blue, I don't know her. She was responding to my blog and telling me that she was going to my site because she always goes to see when my next book is coming out because she loved my book of stories, Sleeping Funny, so much. And I just put that email on my bulletin board. It's here beside me. Her name is Miriam, and there's a note on it that says "Ship it for Miriam." So then, on the days when I feel like, I try and think of Miriam. She wants that. I don't know her at all, but she wants my book, and it's not so much that she'll buy my book; it's that she truly is waiting to read the story that I'm making, and I'm making it in part for her.
That's awesome. All right, let's take a shift here.
Okay.
Canada is a big country, for those who don't realize this.
It's a very big country, yes.
Very big.
With a small population in a very big country.
I've only been to Newfoundland once.
Mm-hmm. Where'd you go?
Well,
St. John's.
Yeah, because I want to speak, and that's where I got to go. So, but just flying over, landing on the rock. I'm a bit crazy for Newfoundland. Talk to me about Woody Point, how long it takes to get to Woody Point. This is also where you write. Talk to me about the Writers' Fest. For those who don't know,
Woody Point Primer
of the universe, Woody Point, Newfoundland.
So Woody Point is, I think, about 200 people. It's on the west coast of Newfoundland, so that's on the Gulf of St. Lawrence there, and it has very different. So Newfoundland is very big, which you really don't understand until you've tried to drive around Newfoundland. So Newfoundland has a population of about 500,000 people, which is the same as the city I live in now. Hamilton is about 500,000 people. And so that's a sizable city, but, it's spread out over a huge island plus Labrador, which is the other part of the province, which is on the Quebec side. So it's on the mainland. Getting there, you can fly from Toronto in 4 hours to the island. And then I would drive for another hour and a half to get to my house in Woody Point. Or what I usually do is I drive for 3 days and take a ferry overnight and drive a fourth day and get to my house. Last year, I didn't go because it was closed because of the pandemic, which I very much supported. It's a very small population with very few resources, medical resources. And so it was not the time to impose myself on my essentially holiday home, though I do try to be part of the community, which I love. There is a writers' festival there, which was my first introduction to Woody Point. Writers at Woody Point, established by the wonderful Stephen Brunt, who is, he's a Renaissance man. He's known in Canada as a sports journalist, a very fine sports journalist, but he is also really a cultural maker. And he is my neighbor in Hamilton here, and originally invited my husband to Writers at Woody Point. We fell in love with it in a way we'd never fallen in love with any place, and started going back every summer basically immediately, and eventually bought our little house there. Yes, I do write there because basically for two writers, you just set up where you are. You got two desks. Hopefully for us, we like a door between them, and you work. And that's what I do. So I don't go there for a holiday so much, but I do go there for a break. Highly recommend it. Wonderful festival, so beautifully curated. I've been part of it for years. Right now on a break from that, focusing on the actual writing, but enjoying it as a person who can attend. Hopefully we'll be able to have some in-person events again soon.
Yes. Now I'm thinking about this because I often recommend to new authors and, writers retreats, writing clubs, things like that.
Yeah.
What are some of the resources or like when you meet, because I've been meeting a lot of aspiring authors and they're worrying about publishing before they've put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard,
Right.
Go and write. So what are some of the things where you direct or think or suggest to people they start looking for?
Again, people create things in very different ways. There are people who are just so self-motivated and, they have a compass for exactly what they want, and they do that. So they go off and they do their own thing entirely. I don't think there's as many of those people as certain people would like to suggest. Almost entirely men, I will say. This idea that I did it myself. I think having people who will connect you, people who will inspire you, people that you can just see, knowing, okay, I had to get up at 5 because I had a little tiny baby, and this is going to be my 1 hour of writing if I'm really, really lucky. And knowing that somebody else is doing that too, it's so heartening. It's so heartening. So there are writing schools you can attend. There are MFA programs. There are MFA programs now. And the one I did, which is at UBC, which is a very highly regarded program in Canada and North America, was largely virtual, which was helpful for people who had careers and families and a lot of already publishing writers, because they had lives. They couldn't just up and leave for years to move to Vancouver. But there's writing schools. It was helpful to me. I met a lot of network there. But now there's all these great programs too, where it's just very similar to your networking space, your networking community that people can become a part of. There are writing communities like that as well, where you can just check in and you can be connected to other writers. The old-fashioned writing group, your neighborhood writing group, not as many of those in lots of places right now, probably in person because of the pandemic, depending on where you live, but they're great. Some of them you exchange actual pages with, some of them you read your work aloud, some of them are just commiseration. Wherever you can find people, I think people are constantly looking for mentors and people who will help them get a leg up or will give them some sort of sanction on their work. It's really important to get feedback on your work, absolutely, at the right point. But I think peers are so important because they're the people that really encourage us to keep going. And then we see when they do well too. It inspires us. It gives us a little kick in the butt. I mean, that was one of the amazing things about my program was people were doing really well and getting listed for awards. And I'm like, oh my God, they let me into this program. I have to keep up with that. Not in a way that was bad, in a way that was inspiring, or at least it was for me. So I think those networks are really important. And those networks continue to sustain you as people start publishing, as you get out there, as you're at literary festivals and various events. You're often meeting people that you connected with earlier on as you were emerging as a writer. But as you get on, yes, literary festivals, events, readings, online, so many online right now. There's so many wonderful things going on online right now. No, you can't connect and have that cocktail party moment as much, but you can still meet people through that, see who asked a question that inspired you. reach out to somebody who was on the program or created the program. And these are all things to be doing way, 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 way before, hopefully, you're actually putting something out in the world, right? So that's one of the things that people come and they want to know, okay, well, how can I create this network quickly? And you know, Kelly, like that is something that happens bit by bit by bit. But let's just talk about like networking for writers, because how do I know you? Because I went to this wonderful, I thought it was fantastic, 2-day workshop set up for Penguin Random authors worldwide. So it was closed just to those people, but I mean, that's thousands of people, right, who have a book in the catalog. It was a wonderful 2-day webinar. You gave a fabulous panel. And I was like, wait a second, I want to know more about her and be part of that network, because I really thought that you were connecting with my kind of idea of how we go out in the world.
Well, thank you for that. You know, I mean, that was it was such an amazing event, but also too, when I think about that event and the thousands of people the thousands of authors that I could connect with, there's 4 and then, you know what, and that's actually not off when I think about, you know, we have these opportunities to connect, whether it's online or in person, and everyone sort of thinks of the one and done. Like, right. Shook your hand once, got your business card.
Right.
I didn't have the chance to ask the speaker the question at the event. Oh, the opportunity's lost. It's like, no, digital. How can you follow up and follow through? And that's what creates the stickiness, or that's what starts to, like building a stone wall, like that puts down attending the event, put down the stone, maybe following up and following through puts down the next stone, and communications. And the next thing you know, you have a wall, you have the strength, you have this network, but just showing up once thinking, oh, this is going to be fabulous.
Right. And also, you talk about this too, not all you don't just want to make a random network, right? Like you want to have connection and interest. So maybe you connect once, and for either party or both parties, it's like, yeah, that's great. Like, it's good. Maybe we'll see each other somewhere 2 years from now. And other times there is a point of connection. There's something that you can follow through on. And those are going to be being alive and alert to those and ready to step in. That's going to make things, it's going to cement things. It's going to put a nice little bit of mortar in that wall.
Exactly. We're not just going to put a bunch of stones. We're actually going to have a brick wall. We're going to have, There are so many more things I want to talk to you about, in particular, because you hit on it in terms of putting a book out there. And I think it's one of these things that a lot of people don't understand, that, even when we have a big publisher, we authors are part of the sales and marketing machine. But can I invite you to, would you put up with me again? Would you come back so we can?
I'd love to. I would love to.
So we can talk more specifically on that element, because I also too, in terms of understanding it from your perspective of the things you've had to do, because I always sort of say to people, hey, I'm just going to, from my perspective as someone who wrote like sort of a how to, that category of book. So I'd love to talk to you more on that.
Well, and you're writing another book now, right?
Yeah, it's happening. It's happening.
We'll have more to talk about.
I know, lots more to talk about. So thank you for being here and being so generous and all that kind of good stuff. Remind people again where they can find you in the interwebs.
Yeah, you can find me both on Twitter and on Instagram at the Mimi Festo, MIMI Festo, and online at mirandahill.com. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Kelly,
for being here.
Bye.
Bye.